Hello, class. Today we're going to talk about three-act structure in film as it pertains to your screenplays. Telling a story in three acts is pretty important because it sort of gives us an outline in which we can write our story. You can kind of think of the acts as a beginning, a middle, of an end, even though they are more involved than that. So, Act 1 is usually the setup, Act 2 is the confrontation, and Act 3 is the resolution. So, in three acts, we're looking at Act 1 as the setup. The first act is where all the major characters of the story are introduced, plus the world in which they live in and the conflict that will move the story forward. In Act 1, the writer has the freedom to create any setting and reality that they wish. It's in the first pages of the script that they define the reasoning and logic of the story. This early in the script, anything is possible. To use an example, I'm going to talk about the film Orange County. In Orange County, our main character, his name is Sean. He's just about to graduate high school and he's looking to go to Stanford University. He has applied to Stanford and is awaiting his letter of acceptance, and that would be the setup to the movie itself in Act 1. During Act 1, there's usually a plot point, as you can see here on the diagram. The plot point is a major twist that provokes the beginning of a new act. In Orange County, Sean finds out that he has not been accepted to Stanford University, and this is the plot point in the end of Act 1 in Orange County. He further finds out that his guidance counselor submitted the wrong transcripts to Stanford University. So he has to now figure out how he's going to be accepted to Stanford. Even though time is running out, he decides to take a trip to Stanford to talk to the Dean of Admissions. That is Act 2. We'll get to Act 2 in just a minute. Act 1 must also present a strong hook. That's an exciting scene early in the script that grabs the audience interest and hooks them into the story. Part of that hook is usually the inciting incident or plot point that takes place somewhere in the beginning of the act. This inciting incident often provokes change in the protagonist's routine, something new that they experience that could either challenge or encourage them. So in this example, Sean does not get accepted to Stanford. There, we have to move into Act 2 now, the confrontation, after he decides to take a trip to Stanford to talk to the Dean of Admission. So Act 2, the second act is by far usually the longest, encompassing half of the movie, and is taking place between the first and third acts. For some screenwriters, Act 2 is the hardest one to squeeze out. This happens because after the initial boost of a new story, the writer is left without plot elements to introduce. The story, its characters, and conflict are all established at this point. The writer has created a solid frame for his narrative, yet he's still roughly 60 pages away from the ending. In the second act, stakes escalate. If the hero is on the fence or confused about what he or she should do, then something must happen by the midpoint of the script to make his goal clear. As you can see in the diagram, in Act 2 we have what's called rising action. Rising action is what basically makes a solid second act. So basically our hero or our main character is going on some sort of journey. In our case of Orange County, Sean is going on a journey from Orange County, California to the northern part of California in Stanford University. Now, it wouldn't be a very fun movie along the way if the main character doesn't run into a bunch of roadblocks and issues that he either has to overcome or fail. So uh, we can think of our main character on a journey. Let's say they're on a road trip and they get a flat tire. The rising action here would be that they now have another hurdle in which they have to overcome. So either they fix the tire or they're stranded. That's usually kind of the two options. Um, so our rising action, we keep having some hurdles along the way, setting up our confrontation. In our case, in the movie Orange County, Sean finally makes it to Stanford and finds the dean of admissions at home. He's about to leave on a trip with his family as school has just ended for them. Um, so while they're having this confrontation, we're having this kind of secondary story in the background of uh, the dean's family, his wife and kids, getting ready for this trip. Um, the wife is constantly calling to him saying we need to hurry up, while Sean is basically giving him uh, his case for what happened in which he got denied access to coming to Stanford. Um, the stakes do get a little bit higher during this confrontation as the dean of admissions accidentally takes some, I believe they were painkillers, um, and he doesn't really know what's going on throughout the scene as it progresses. Eventually, he leaves with Sean to go to um, the records office. Um, so, our plot point here would be as they get to the records office, they find that it has been set on fire. This kind of throws a stick in the spokes of our main character as he's trying to get accepted, and so he can plan his trip um, and plan his freshman year at school. So basically, that's Act Two in a nutshell. Usually, there's some sort of crisis at the beginning of Act Three. In the last act, Act 3 presents the final confrontation of the movie, followed by the denouement. What actually means is the final stage of a play or a movie or a novel in which all the loose ends kind of get tied up. Um, this act is usually the shortest in length because quickly after the second turning point in the script, the main character is face to face with the villain, or just about. The third act is also when the writer ties up any loose ends and offers a resolution to the subplots. The resolution can give extra information for a more elaborate character arc. Character arcs are important, but that's going to be another lesson in of itself. To talk about Act 3, we usually have the stakes getting higher. We have our rising action, and it usually comes to a plateau at the beginning of Act 3. So in Act 3, basically, Sean, in our example of Orange County, uh, has been pretty much let down by any thoughts of getting into Stanford, although there's a possibility. The falling action in Act 3, as you can see on our diagram. Um, so the falling action basically, like I said earlier, ties up loose ends and brings our character face to face with the villain. Um, in our case, the villain is the fire, destroying his records. I don't think the dean specifically is the villain, although he could be considered a co-villain. Um, in the end of the movie, Sean decides he doesn't need to go to Stanford to be a writer. He decides to stay back and do writing in Orange County. And that's the end of the film and the end of Act 3. So, a couple key points to go over. Three act structure. Act 1 is the setup. You have to set the story up. tell us what's going on and who's involved. Act 2 is the confrontation. This is where the character basically has to overcome obstacles in order to get to where he or she is trying to go. Act 3 is the resolution. This is where basically all the loose ends are tied up. The story is over, and that's our 3-act structure. I apologize for Act 2 in your diagram up top says actually 2. It should say Act 2. I apologize. I will also put this up on Blackboard Learn. All right.